We're live.
Great. Faith, are we all systems go to get going with the meeting?
I believe so.
Excellent. Well, I will turn it over to Commissioner Bishop and let you start the meeting rolling.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. And good evening and welcome to the Young Leaders Talk on Climate. This is a special event to bring youth voice to state government on climate change. And I'm really excited about this meeting today. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. My name is Laura Bishop, and I'm the chair of the Environmental Quality Board. And I'm also the chair of the governor's climate change subcabinet, as well as the commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So it's those three hats that I kind of come wearing tonight to kick off this meeting. I'm joined by members of the Environmental Quality Board and the Climate Change Subcabinet tonight. The EQB, the Environmental Quality Board, EQB, is made up of heads of 9 state agency and public members from around the state. And the board works to enhance Minnesota environmental quality for current and future generations. And climate change is a core focus of this group. The Climate Change Subcabinet, which was established by Governor Walz in 2019, coordinates policies and strategies to address climate change here in Minnesota. I and other members of the EQB and the subcabinet are here tonight because we care deeply about Minnesota's youth and the quality of their environment now and in the future. We know that young people will be impacted by climate change and that our actions today will influence their lives. We invited young environmental leaders from across Minnesota to lead tonight's event so that we can listen and learn from them about ways that we can make a brighter climate resilient future. And on behalf of EQB and the Climate Change Subcabinet, I'm excited to work with EQB's emerging environmental leaders, or EELs, and their spring cohort to help lead this event. I love that. You know, we affectionately call them the EELs. That's the emerging environmental leaders, or they call themselves that, this group of young adults. And you can read about them in the meeting agenda. I know a number of us, either on the EQB or Climate Change Subcabinet, have met kind of in person, not in person, but virtually, but in small groups with the EELs. And I found that it was really exciting to have those conversations and hear from them on their ideas, but also their interests. I mean, these are youth and young adults that we want to have engaged in our government, and leaders coming into state government as well. So we want to welcome our partner in the EELS program, the University of Minnesota Institute on the Environment, and members of the public, young and old, who are watching via YouTube tonight. Before I turn it over to Faith Krogstad of EQB, I want to introduce members of the EQB and the subcabinet. So colleagues, I will read your names, and please unmute yourself. And if you can, both come on to video to say your name and your role as well. So I'll do that now and start in an order. I know some of the commissioners and others have not been able to join tonight, but for those that are here, please chime in. So I'll start with, we'll kind of go in alphabetical order. I'll start with Margaret Anderson Kelleher. I know that she was traveling and might not be back in time. So if she joins us later, we'll have her introduce herself then. Grace Arnold.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Arnold. I'm the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Commerce. So we oversee energy planning in the state. We're the public representative at the Public Utilities Commission, but we also oversee insurance and banking And those are some of the areas that I think we'll actually see a lot more discussion about climate change and how that might affect the finances of those companies, but also insurance companies end up paying for a lot of claims because of climate disasters. And so that's been one of the really, the lens of climate change has been one of the really rewarding things about the department, because it's actually something we can all work on, which normally we end up just kind of doing each does their own job. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you all today. And thank you for that. This is wonderful.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner Arnold. Kristen Eide Tollefson. Okay, Kristen is a public member on the EQB from Congressional District 2, but we'll move to the next. Alan Forsberg, are you here, Alan? Julie Gehring.
Hi, I'm Julie Gehring. I'm the public member from the 7th Congressional District in Northwest Minnesota. Nice to be here.
Great, thanks, Julie. Serving on the EQB. Great. Kevin McKinnon from DEED, are you here?
He wasn't able to join us, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Mehmet Konar-Steenberg.
Hi there. I'm Mehmet Konar-Steenberg. I'm the public member from Congressional District 5, and I teach over at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law. I'm really happy to be here and plan to do a lot of careful listening and learning.
Thank you. Do we have a representative from the Minnesota Department of Health that's on tonight?
Yes, this is Jim Kelly. I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Department of Health and Commissioner Jan Malcolm, who couldn't be here this evening. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward, like Mehmet, to listening to what folks have to say tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Nicholas Martin.
Hi, Nick Martin. I'm the public member from Congressional District 4, St. Paul. My day job is with Xcel Energy, where I work on a lot of climate stuff and decarbonizing different sectors of the economy. So I don't represent Xcel on the EQB. I'm a public member, but certainly interested from a lot of the work that we're trying to do in hearing from you all. How we can do more. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, our public members bring a lot of good expertise. They don't come on representing kind of their interests of whether it's a company or the U or Hamlin Mitchell, but they come kind of with that expertise, which is great to have. Tom Peterson.
Hi, I'm Tom Peterson. I'm the Commissioner of Agriculture, and great to be with everybody tonight. Climate is obviously a really big issue with agriculture and farms across Minnesota, and great to listen to everybody tonight. So glad to join you.
Thank you. Alice Roberts Davis. Okay, I don't think she's here. She's the Commissioner for Department of Administration. Sarah Strowman.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Strowman. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and climate issues are really woven through so much of our work at the department. We host the State Office of Climatology, so we work on gathering data and information and disseminating that data and information. We manage the state's public waters and 5.5 million acres of public land. So how we manage that land for climate mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency, of course, is a greater focus of ours. And we manage a lot of outdoor activities. So whether that's timber harvest that relies on cold winters to access lands across wetlands, or whether that's ice fishing, which is of course a favorite pastime in Minnesota. Those are things that are also being affected by changing climate. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the discussion tonight and listening to some perspectives that you all have to share with us.
Commissioner, I'm just gonna break in and be the mean one. We love hearing from all of our leaders, but we have such a tight agenda that we'll ask if folks can just say kind of their name and title. So we apologize about that. Hopefully there'll be a little bit of time for exchange later on. And I do want to say that we're having some troubles with the live stream. We're working on that. So if anybody's getting messages on the side about the live stream, we're trying to figure that out. So anyway, sorry to be the timekeeper here.
And Katie, this is
Thank
Al
you.
Forsberg in Mankato, and I have to break in too because my name is temporarily Kathy on your screen.
Oh.
My laptop wouldn't boot up, and so this is my wife's computer, and for this evening, I will be a boy named Kathy.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you very much. Great. So thanks for keeping us on track and being mean. And I think we're getting moving on now that we've had Jerry Van Amberg. We'll move to Benjamin Javaki. Or did we miss Jerry? Is Jerry here?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, sorry, Jerry. Yeah.
Jerry Van Amberg, Chair of the Board of Water and Soil Resources. Good evening.
Hi, Jerry. Okay, Benjamin Javaki.
Do we want to acknowledge Gerald, or do we want to acknowledge myself?
We already acknowledged Gerald. So now we're moving to you, Ben.
Okay, so I would like to follow in step with Sid and Sam coming from Morris, and I'd really be interested in understanding some of the things that they would want to incorporate within our University of Minnesota system, because Morris is doing a lot of beautiful things.
Yes, they are.
A lot of great things with respect to sustainability, and I feel like they can be a model for the rest of our institution.
Great, thank you. Yes, they can. Councilmember Sue Vento, sorry, I saw Charlie Zelli on here too. So if one of you or both of you are on here, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Charlie Zelli. I'm chair of the Met Council, and I'm joined by Councilmember Sue Vento, who regularly attends the EQB, and I have been part of the SubCabinet. We're a regional government, not a state agency, but we're part of this effort. I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody tonight.
Great. Sue Vento?
I'm looking forward to listening. It's going to be a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And now on to climate change subcabinet members. Katie Pratt?
Katie Pratt, Executive Director, Environmental Quality Board.
Great. Rosalind Robertson?
Good evening. Good evening. So happy to be here. I'm Rosalind Robertson, the Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry.
Great, thank you. John Jaski?
Good evening, John Jaski, Executive Director of Board of Water and Soil Resources.
Great, thank you. Did I miss anybody?
Madam Chair?
Yes. Oh, you're here. Great.
Margaret Anderson Kelleher. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I would love to get to say more, but I'm not going to do that right now. We actually are leading with a number of colleagues around the country of modernizing the transportation system to work on climate change issues. And so there's a number of ways we're doing that, but I'm glad to be here. I'm both a member of the EQB as well as the climate subcabinet. And my background actually is as a legislator. I was Speaker of the House when we passed the Next Generation Energy Act so long ago.
Great. Did I miss anybody else from the EQB or the climate subcabinet? Okay. If not, I'll turn it over to Faith.
Thank you, Chair Bishop. We are so excited to have this group of leaders with us here tonight for this important conversation. My name is Faith Krogstad. I'm the Engagement and Communications Director at the Environmental Quality Board. I've had the pleasure of facilitating the EELS program this year, along with my EQB colleague, Giuseppe Tuminello, and our partners at the University of Minnesota's Institute on the Environment, Beth Mercer-Taylor and Troy Goodnow, who are here tonight with us. The EQB, together with the Institute on the Environment and other partners, have worked to elevate youth voice through EQB's Environmental Congress events and board meetings since 2013. Continuing in this tradition, this EELS cohort will facilitate this joint meeting of the EQB and the Climate Change SubCabinet. There are 16 EELS in the cohort this spring, and all are between the ages of 18 and 24 years old, representing different parts of Minnesota, different backgrounds, and stages of their education and careers. We selected them from a competitive pool of applicants for their leadership on climate change and other environmental issues. They bring many different talents, skills, and interests, ranging from public health to journalism to environmental engineering. Despite never having met one another in person, this group came together in March and have collaborated to design and plan this meeting, sharing their stories and ideas with you. In a minute, I'm going to hand over facilitation to the EELS, but I might jump in from time to time. First, I'd like to give you an idea of how this meeting is going to work. The EELS, the EQB, and the Climate Change SubCabinet are on a Zoom meeting, while members of the public are watching live on YouTube. We invite everyone to participate on our online platform, Slido, which I'll describe in a minute. We are recording this meeting, and of course it is live streaming. EEL members will be speaking from their own experience and expressing their own views, and these do not necessarily reflect those of the EQB or the SubCabinet. Additionally, EELs will not know the EQB and SubCabinet titles that people are accustomed to hearing in our meetings. So please bear with us. We mean no disrespect, and we appreciate your understanding. One thing you could do to help is to try to rename yourself in Zoom with the title that you would like people to use for you, or at the minimum, maybe if you have just a first name or the name of a family member, to rename it to your name. So we have a lot of speakers and a very tight timeline this evening. I know that people are going to want to have good discussion, and we might have to cut it short just to ensure that the EELs can say everything they want to say tonight. And we have a half an hour after the meeting closes as a coffee half hour, which the EELs will share more about in a little bit, so that people can stay on and continue the conversation. So a little bit of Zoom instruction for the EQB and SubCabinet members who are on Zoom right now. You may be asked to use the hand raise feature. So to use this feature, you click on the reactions button at the bottom of your screen on the bottom right and click raise hand. We also might be using the chat feature, so you can chat questions or reflections into the chat. That button is also across the bottom of your screen. And you can change the way that your screen looks by, in the upper right, clicking on the view button. At this point, I'd like to share some meeting norms for everyone. We are asking everyone in this meeting to be respectful, to stay focused on our common goal of elevating youth voice in our climate change dialogue. We ask everyone to speak your truth and seek understanding of truths that differ from your own. Be kind and brave, and to look for learning. It's better to be a learner and get it right than to be a knower and be right. And that's a quote from Brene Brown. So we will be using these norms tonight as we moderate the conversation here on Zoom and also in Slido. So if you put in a comment in Slido and it disappears, it may just be because it's off topic or something like that. So we're going to get going with Slido. So up on the screen here, we've got some instructions. You'll take any internet connected device, whether it's a computer, tablet, or phone, and you're going to browse to slido.com. You'll be prompted to enter the event code of this meeting, which is EELS May 19. Doesn't matter if it's capital or not, and you don't need that hashtag sign. And the first question we have tonight is, what do you love about Minnesota? We're going to be making a word cloud. You can submit as many answers as you would like. So as you answer this question, think about where you live, your favorite coffee shop or state park. Think about your neighbors, the seasons. What do you love about Minnesota in this great state? So we'll keep this open for a few minutes. I'm going to hand it off to Sydney Bauer. You may remember Sydney Bauer. She may look familiar to you. She was a she's a returning eel. She actually delivered a plenary speech at the 2019 Environmental Congress to 400 people. It was quite the rousing speech and difficult to follow. And we're really happy to have her back as a leader within the Emerging Environmental Leaders crew. Sid is full of sunshine and energy, and she'll be emceeing tonight. And I'll let Sid say more about herself as we go through this meeting tonight, but I'm going to hand it off to Sid.
Thank you, Faith, and welcome everybody. Before we begin, for my sake, for all of your sakes, I'm going to invite you all to stretch with me because I can talk really fast and I've been sitting down a lot recently. So just move your body, your human fleshy body in a way that feels good. I'm going to do some of these. Get that lower back. It feels good. It's good. Do my neck a little bit. Wiggle my fingers. Feels good. My toes, I forget they're down there when they're under my laptop all day. And then this is the most important part. I invite us to all do this together. Is we're going to do shoulders up, shoulders back, shoulders down. Wiggle your fingers a little bit. And then if you want to, take a couple of deep breaths. Take one more. Okay, now hopefully I will talk a little bit slower and so you can hear me, but I hope you have your snacks ready and you're excited to hear from youth across Minnesota. My name, like Faith said, is Sid Bauer. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a 24-year-old living in Morris, Minnesota. I spend most of my time these days driving for the Morris Transit, hanging out with my dog, Norma. And recently my dad bought me a circular saw for my birthday, so I've been doing some beginner woodworking and I'm having some fun with it. As the night goes on, you're going to get to hear from young people who enjoy killing invasive weeds, who can play the banjo, who work at dental clinics. There's a bajillion recent graduates and people who have just been doing homework for the past month, so amazing on them for that too. And you're going to hear from all these people specifically as we share with you about youth realities and youth futures. So the EELS framed this year's event this way because through all of our meetings, in our planning, we decided that what we most wanted you to hear was the complex, the personal, and the sometimes overwhelming ways that the climate crisis and all of its intertangled systemic issues are directly impacting young people's realities, as well as impacting our projected versus our desired futures. We hope that tonight, instead of feeling hopeful for how young people can change the world, we get enough of that already. We hope that you feel a stronger connection to young people and a responsibility to help us and every generation after us thrive. At the end of this event, like Faith said, we're going to give space and time for folks to leave and continue on with their nights. But if you're intrigued and want to keep chatting and asking questions, we're going to keep the Zoom open to host a bring your own coffee half hour is what we're calling it. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but don't worry, get to chat. But for now, we're going to start our evening, and I'm going to hand it over to my pal Tegan, who's going to lead us through some Slido questions. So pull out your device, go back to Slido, and she's going to get our brain juices flowing. And then after that, we're really going to dive in to what youth want you to know about their realities. So Tegan, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Sid. Amazing introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Tegan Grolkowski. I'm originally from Winona, Minnesota. I am a 2020 graduate with environmental studies, and I have 2 minors in Indigenous sustainability and economics. I'd like to think I have a pretty well-rounded and diverse image of what Minnesota is like, being from the oddball southeast corner of the Driftless area where sinkholes and rattlesnakes are nothing new around here, and going to school at Bemidji State University surrounded by Northwoods and the 3 largest tribes in Minnesota. Recently, my days have consisted of working, garden prepping, and Zumba classes at my local Y. I'm really looking forward to sharing the stories of my amazing fellow youth who have spent the last few months putting this together, but first we want to get you thinking. So if you make your way to the Slido link, I see a lot of people have put answers in already. We'll ask our first question, what do you love about Minnesota, the state you so graciously agreed to work for? So far, looks like we have new Americans. Lakes is the biggest one. I know I put lakes. Nature, winter, Lake Superior. Oh my goodness, it keeps moving on me. Spring and fall seasons, Gunflint Trail. I think a lot of us definitely relate to the outdoors, so I see a lot of that. Twin Cities, Spy House Coffee, state parks, natural beauty, really loving these. Minnesota nice, cross-country skiing trails, open-minded people. I really like all of these. Prairie, Lake Street, sneak a few more in there. Greenhouse on my campus, water is a big one. Rivers, trails, lakes, awesome. Okay, I think we all definitely feel some connection to Minnesota after seeing all these answers. So if we want to move on to our next question. So on this one, we want you to take a trip down memory lane. You're graduating. Everyone is asking what your next moves are, but ultimately, you're young. The world is your oyster. Can be as broad as career paths or as small as your first legal drink. So what are some thoughts and ideas going through your brain as a young person? The future, very broad. College and grad school, adventure. Triple minoring on accident. I want to hear that story. Got travel, learning about taxes. I still don't know too much about taxes, but we're getting there. I'm sure a lot of the adults are in the same boat there. We'll end up working. We'll ever find a teaching assignment, moving, paying my bills. I feel that one. Wearing masks, social distancing, insurance with 4 question marks. Doing something interesting and worthwhile. I think that weighs on a lot of us too. Going on dates. How do I use my talents and interests to find a job I'll enjoy? I like these. I like that it's as simple as how to make or where was that last one? What good food I want to eat. So something as specific as eco-experience worker. That's really awesome. Oh gosh, surviving the Cold War. I love this. So if we want to move on to our next question, clearly there's always some generational overlaps when it comes to what's on our minds, right? So was climate and its effects on your minds then? How how will a changing climate impact you and your family? I know for me at least, there's either a lot more snow or there's no snow, which I definitely different from how I was growing up. Social unrest. Energy bills, budgeting. Didn't even buy skis because didn't think it was worth it. Must be southern Minnesota. It will determine if I want one. Family separation. Less travel by plane. Fewer winter vacations. Moving somewhere colder. Minnesota's pretty cold. At least in Bemidji. Food sovereignty. Worse air and worse health outcomes. Significant seasonal changes and a passion to make a difference in my decisions and choices. My kids are wondering if they should have kids. Knowing a lot of kids in the environmental science major, at least in Bemidji State, that's a big one too with the kids. Heat days, beaches disappearing, droughts and floods. I think everyone has definitely been thinking about this a lot lately, which is really good to see. I really appreciate everyone answering these. Thank you, everybody. I think we all got the gears turning here, so I'm going to pass it on to my fellow cohorts who are excited to share. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to find myself and make my face big. There we are. Hello, me. Okay, so Tegan's got our brains going about some of tonight's main themes. So we're going to jump right into that first section of our evening, which is our realities. So the goal for the next 20 minutes or so is to provide an opportunity for the eels to share a bit more with you about their realities. Each of the eels in this section of the event have come up with a question or two that they would want someone to ask them. I'm going to ask them that question. The eels represent a diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and personal stories. So after the eels share their stories, we'll have some time to hear some of your reflections and questions for the eels. But if you do have any during this section of the evening, just type them into the chat and we'll get back to them at the end of this part. So yeah, I'm going to start off first with Kelly. Kelly, there you are. Everybody can see Kelly. And Kelly, we just asked this question to the group as a whole, but this was the question you also wanted to be asked. So how has climate and environmental challenges affected your family and your current career trajectory? Take it away.
Great question. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this important conversation, and I'm excited to share about myself. My name is Kelly Saby. I'm a third-year student at the University of St. Thomas, where I'm studying public health with minors in justice and peace, sustainability, and gender studies. I migrated to the U.S. when I was 3 years old, and I now live in Arden Hills, Minnesota. Speaking as a public health student at the University of St. Thomas, one of the greatest challenges I have seen and experienced is living out of forms of environmental injustices as a Latinx in my community. Growing up in the suburbs of Roseville and moving to Arden Hills, there was not much recreational space around for my family, mostly just highways and noise pollution. I remember having to bike to a park or a trail 5 to 10 miles from where I live just to experience the green space many families have access to, and I didn't really understand why this was. Recreational justice in Minnesota is something I believe is interconnected with environmentalism, and I think it requires direct action. Building sustainable green spaces in communities where there's high volumes of traffic and other environmental hazards opens up avenues for vulnerable community members like me in Minnesota to join the conversation on environmentalism. I feel like this would have made my childhood much easier and I wouldn't have had to worry about biking home late before sunset. Luckily, I now live near Rice Creek Park where I can hike with my dog Matilda. But despite these challenges, my story in public health education has given me the tools to see the ties between environmental health and how the effects of climate change have disproportionately impacted people like me. I still find myself answering this question day to day, and I seek comfort in being able to use my voice to shed light on these issues that matter to me.
There we go, I mute myself. Thank you, Kelly. I like hearing your story of kind of coming to realizations and seeing things from your past. It's cool to hear about. But I'm also curious as to how this story of climate migration and your current academic interests have influenced your present activism and your research specifically.
Another great question. As a product of immigrants, when I was really little, I didn't really understand that the environment could be harmed. And I feel like many of us shared this experience, which is why having this conversation on climate issues is integral for building a sustainable future. After all, youth are the future. But as a carefree kid, I picked flowers. I was afraid of bees. I used plastic water bottles and straws. I know it's bad. My mom didn't really understand either, and I felt like it was so easy to consume and benefit from how easy it can be to open packages just to be thrown away, or even about the chain of events on how we get the things we buy or order that we can be harmful towards the environment, or how the clothes we wear were made through terrible processes. Later on, I would only recognize environmentalism as a part of Earth Day. Still then, I couldn't really understand. And I feel like despite my migration story, environmentalism has been absent in the narratives of those most impacted. I'm learning to navigate environmentalism in a way where I don't have to be a biologist or something exceptional to understand how I can advocate for my community. The educational gaps in my upbringing have been slowly closed through me finding connection as an immigrant to public health, to the environment. Despite how small I may feel in this area, because I'm still learning, I'm starting somewhere, and I feel that that's what counts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing your story and for being the first eel to be vulnerable tonight. So a round of virtual applause for Kelly this evening. Hooray, hooray. Thank you, Kelly. I hear a lot of connection through place and culture to Kelly's story. I also know that's something that hits home with Rachel, another eel. Rachel isn't here with us tonight, but she did record a video of her story. So we're gonna jump over to Rachel. Rachel, go ahead through your video and introduce yourself and who you are.
My name is Rachel Zhang. I'm 19 years old and I'm from Rochester, Minnesota. I'm currently on a gap year, which kind of explains my background right now, but I will be studying at the University of Pennsylvania this fall.
Rachel's first question was, where does your climate story begin and how has it affected your activism in the present?
My climate story begins when I was much younger, when I would go visit my grandparents who lived in Beijing, China. They lived in an apartment complex that was basically a maze of other towering apartments in a very, very small area of the city. I loved it there. There were street vendors where I could find any type of food I wanted, and I could always spend time with my family, who I usually couldn't see because I lived in the States while they lived there. But because of how crowded it was, along with the fact that Beijing is one of the most polluted cities in the world, it really took its effects on my grandparents and my family. My grandparents, who were relatively healthy, despite their old age, they loved to go on walks, they ate really well, and they were overall happy people, but they were constantly coughing up yellow phlegm because of the air pollution in China. My experiences and what I witnessed in China when I was younger has really shown me how climate change affects those who are lower income and maybe don't have as many opportunities as other groups to access clean air, clean water. And it shows me that when it comes to fighting the climate crisis, we need to focus on those marginalized communities first, who are affected disproportionately compared to other groups when it comes to climate change.
Rachel also wanted to be asked the question specifically about her experiences fighting climate change. And what that's been like, and what have been some of her struggles and also some of her successes.
My experience in fighting climate change started off pretty difficult. I often felt very powerless in that no matter what I did, no matter how many people I talked to, protests I attended, campaigns I led, that I wasn't making as big of an impact as I was hoping to. And I also felt very alone in the process. And I used this frustration this past summer to start my nonprofit called Rochester Community Initiative. We are a 501c3 that is dedicated to empowering young, diverse voices in the Rochester area and giving them a platform to speak their truth and train them on how to make a larger impact in our community as a coalition rather than just on our own. And I believe that this has been my biggest success in my fight for combating climate change, because instead of having a bunch of young individuals trying to navigate their way through the environmental movement, we created a larger group that can help each other, that can comfort each other. And although we are still facing different struggles when it comes to combating the climate crisis, we now have each other as resources, as friends, and we can learn from each other and actively make a bigger push towards fighting climate change.
Awesome. Thank you, virtual Rachel. Round of virtual applause for Rachel. We're going to jump over to another eel who is with us here tonight, and I'm going to find her on my screen so that I can spotlight her. Bam, there she is. Hi, Camille. Rachel had talked about doing work in her community through organizations, but Camille here has done some work in a different way, and specifically surrounding art. So Camille, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit how you have used art to raise awareness on global and local environmental issues.
Thank you, Sid. That's a really good question. Before I begin to answer that, I want to briefly introduce myself. So my name is Camille Will, and I am a rising sophomore double majoring in biology and environmental studies at Gustavus Adolphus College. My primary artistic medium is photography, and my interest and passion for photographing the natural world began when my father surprised me with a Pentax K30 camera for my 11th birthday. Right away, I was hooked. After 2 years of experimentation with my camera, I decided to create a website in association with Viewbug, an online photo sharing platform that allows passionate photographers from around the world to connect and share their stories. And I've continued to update my site over the years. I'm happy to say that I now have over 10,000 awards and almost 4,000 followers. My photography website has also served as an encouraging and promising way for me to connect with other environmentalists and raise awareness of important ecological issues. My photography skills were especially useful when I filmed and documented coral bleaching in Aruba. One of my photos in particular, depicting a half-bleached coral skeleton surrounded by the broken remains of the rest of the reef, was especially eye-opening for many of my followers and online acquaintances. Next year, I hope to document and more about climate change and conservation efforts by studying abroad in Bolivia. In the meantime, I will continue to volunteer and use photography in my local community. I recently finished a term serving as the photographer and historian for the Spring Lake Association, and I plan to continue my local environmental advocacy work through the utilization of my DJI Spark drone and my waterproof GoPro. I also secured an internship for the summer with the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District, where I'll be monitoring carp populations and studying the effects of zebra mussels on aquatic ecosystems. Mitigating the spread of aquatic invasive species is something that I'm very passionate about, and I actually spent last summer working as a watercraft inspector at boat landings in Scott and Hennepin County. My work with the water guards in the Minnesota DNR is something that I'm proud of, and I'm looking forward to continuing my work with this important cause this summer. Without the dedication and passion of invested Minnesotans like you, our lakes wouldn't be as clean, ecologically diverse, or accessible as they are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. I linked Camille's website in the chat. You can also find it in her bio and see some more of her pictures. I was looking over them today. Very impressive. I really like that you bring folks into the conversation through your photography. I think that's pretty special. It's something that fuels you, which is cool. I also know, however, that some young people, their passions are being impacted because of the intensity of the climate crisis. And so to that, we'll jump over to another eel who isn't here tonight, Camila. And she has also recorded a video for us answering her question about mental and physical health of herself and those around her. So go ahead, video, Camila.
Hi everybody, so I just want to say I'm recording a video because I am out of the country and I'm not sure if I'm going to have the best Wi-Fi, but I still wanted to share my story. So the question for me is, has climate change and pollution affected my mental health and that of those around me? And this is not an easy question to answer. It's not a very happy answer, but it's a story that I still think it's important that we bring up and share. So my name is Camila Merino. I studied environmental and ecological engineering at the University of Minnesota. I was born in Colombia and I lived there until I was 12 years old. And growing up in Colombia, I was always really concerned with the environment. So I got sick from drinking water many times. I spent many nights in a hospital because of the water that came from the tap. Also, many of my family members didn't have running water. My grandma would only have running water between 3 and 4 a.m. So we would wake up really early in the morning and fill up huge vats of water that we could use the rest of the day. And not only that, but we also had floods, just wash entire cities out. I have family members that died because they got dragged by floodwater. So growing up, because of these experiences, I was always very aware and very concerned with pollution and climate change. As I grew older and I moved to the United States, my concerns did not decrease. I read books and articles and reports and realized that these are issues affecting people all over the world and affecting people in Minnesota. It's not limited to other countries. And, well, you know, climate change is huge. It's not limited to just water. There's droughts, there's wildfires, there's heat waves, and you know all of that. And my point of my story is not to talk about that. The point is that, like most of the people my age, I grew up hearing about climate change and its effects, knowing that when they talked about future generations, they meant us. And this was a source of fear that is constantly there for me. I have felt the urgency of it and the helplessness and hopelessness that has come with it. For most of my life until now, it's been something that somebody else has had to deal with and I haven't had any say in, so I just get the anxiety of it. It's the reason I studied ecological engineering, and it's given me a fire, a drive to do that. I'm glad it has, but the anxiety and urgency from it has not gone away just because I've decided to dedicate my career to it. I have spent a lot of nights reading about this and crying about this, just afraid over what will happen to me in the future and what will happen to so many other people all over the world in the future because of environmental issues. But it's not limited to me. I have talked to my friends. I have talked to friends down from panic attacks that they've had specifically because of environmental issues. There are times when I have had friends that are depressed for weeks because they're thinking about the environment, they're thinking about everything that's happening and how it's gonna keep getting worse, and they're so afraid that they can't get off of bed for weeks. And that's happened to me too. It's a really scary reality that we have to face. Not just that, but most of the people my age that I know personally are certain that I'm not going to be able to start families, specifically because of climate uncertainty. it's something that we all talk about, and it's an issue that's always at the back of my mind and weighs heavy on me. So I guess my story is that my reality is that climate change is scary. And while it gives me purpose and it's why I'm following my career, it's also paralyzing and deeply affects my mental health daily and that of almost everybody that I know that is my age. Well, it's not a happy story, it's my reality. Thank you for listening.
Let's have a round of virtual applause for Camila for sharing and being vulnerable with her story. She speaks how from a young age, her mental and physical health have already been negatively impacted by the climate crisis and her lack of control over it, which is very relatable, I believe. And I want to jump over to Akia now. I'm finding Akia on my screen. Bam, there's Akia. Hi, Akia. You have a story to share that's also about family and also about connection to land and resources. And so specifically the question you wanted to be asked was, what are environmental concerns in your daily life and also your perspective as a son of refugees and immigrants? So take it away.
Yes, thank you for the question, Sid. So my name is Akia, and I am a student at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities studying environmental sciences, policy, and management. And I'm the son of Hmong refugees. So just a quick short lesson for those that do not know, the Hmong people are an ethnic group with roots in Southeast Asia. And historically, the Hmong people have always having a strong connection with the land as they lived off of it. So in my family, my grandparents and parents, they spent their days farming the field, fishing the streams, hunting the forest, foraging for wild vegetables. And when they immigrated to Minnesota, that connection with the land was severed as their daily lives changed from agrarian culture to more of an urban life. And with the loss of connection to the land, the connection to a natural environment and climate was strained as well. And then, and decades ago, climate was mainly just a concern for the growing season, but now in the present and in Minnesota, climate has become a daily concern for them as well. In our Twin Cities home today, there are still traces of my family's strong connection to the environment, but it's mainly through our small vegetable garden and occasional fishing or hunting trips now. And through these outdoor activities, the impacts of climate change are ever changing and affecting my family and how we interact with their environment. Outside in our backyard, our vegetable garden, my parents worry about spending too much time outdoors because we live close to the highway and next to several large industrial facilities. Those air pollutants, in addition to the increased heat days, reducing the time that they can safely spend outdoors nurturing their garden for healthy and affordable food. And although our home location can be convenient for access to school, work, and opportunities, so too is the access to the exposure of excess environmental concerns and climate impact. In North Minneapolis, where I live, communities of color have some of the highest health disparities in the state. Some existing environmental concerns consist of lead in the very soil we use for our vegetable gardens, particulate matter from industrial and vehicle emissions, and mercury and plastic in our drinking water supply. These environment concerns affect how we live and cause some of these health implications for many families, including my own. Now, impacts from climate change, such as urban heat island due to decreasing tree canopy or flooding due to increase in extreme precipitation events, are some of those projections. These changing climate impacts will not happen alone. They will become intertwined with already present social circumstances. And together, these are some of my daily environmental and climate concerns. And I hope through sharing this story, you better understand my and my family's experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Akia, for sharing that. You share a lot of specific examples, which I find helpful about your story and how the climate crisis is impacting you and your family, and also specifically your North Minneapolis community. You also made a point about how we need to take all these complexities and intertangled things into account when we're thinking about decisions for the future. So thank you for sharing that. Virtual applause for Akia, everyone. Virtual applause. So our last speaker for the Futures group this evening is Karine. I'm going to find Karine, searching. There you are. And I know through chatting with Karine that they're thinking about the actions people are taking, like Akia was talking about, to impact the future. So Karine, I asked to you a great question written by somebody. What has been some of your experience as a BIPOC person doing environmental justice work? And also, what areas of work are most important to you? Take it away.
Such a wonderful question to be asked. Hello, my name is Corinne Lomanstone and I use she, they pronouns. I'm a first year at Middlebury College in Vermont, majoring in conservation biology. If you are not familiar with Middlebury College, just think of Carleton, but in the middle of nowhere in Vermont. It's the same vibe. Middlebury is also the first college to have an environmental studies program, which I personally think is pretty cool. Onto my story. In high school, I often felt like I didn't belong in environmental groups, and as though they were reserved for a certain type of people who didn't experience struggles such as racism or money trouble, and so they had the energy and resources to be super focused on the environment. I went to Hopkins High School, which many of you are probably familiar with, which is pretty diverse, at least in Minnesota terms, with about 50% people of color. But in all my environmental activities, such as Envirothon and AP Environmental Science, I was one of under 4 people of color, and typically the only African American, or one of 2, the other being my friend Freddie. I stood out. And if me, a biracial person who grew up in a pretty white neighborhood, Golden Valley, and has the benefit of being middle class, didn't feel welcome in these spaces, I can only imagine how low-income people and people from non-white areas would feel. Additionally, at least in my college, there's a huge emphasis on avoiding non-sustainable companies and finding sustainable options. However, that's not really an option for people without an abundance of money, as something as basic as a blanket is easily 3 times the cost when made sustainably. This creates another barrier where people without high income aren't perceived as sustainable individuals, which is often a prerequisite for being taken seriously on environmental issues. Finally, another similar area of work that's important to me is access to nature. There are too many places in Minnesota, like Theodore Wirth Park, which is right near my house, which is a wonderful place to enjoy the outdoors. But 2 of the most popular activities there are mountain biking and cross-country skiing, which are incredibly expensive to start and not at all accessible to the low-income families that live right near the park. I'm super passionate about removing these barriers and getting marginalized voices more involved in the current prevalent genre of predominantly white sustainability. Working with my college's Sustainability Solutions Lab this year and trying to increase diversity on our team has led to me realizing that there's a never-ending cycle of people not feeling comfortable with the culture of environmental spaces. But in order to change that culture, you need those exact same people to join those spaces, and they reasonably don't want to. Another barrier is that when you look at who's best suited for paid environmental positions, it's often based off of unpaid activities such as volunteer work, which isn't accessible to people who are in need of money. I have been fortunate enough to be able to continue my environmental work because I found opportunities that offer a wage or a stipend. I am the only Black person on this team of young environmental leaders, and if this position did not offer a stipend, I would not be able to be here and my voice would not be heard. And that is my reality.
Thank you, Corinne, for sharing. I remember you bringing up the comment about the stipend at one of our meetings long ago. Fantastic work sharing your story. Thank you. I hear observations about those who are welcomed with open arms into environmentalism and those who are not. I hear a personal and a complex frustration with lack of accessibility and effort in movements. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. I want to give we got to give a virtual round of applause for Corinne. Wait, virtual round of applause for Corinne. And then also another virtual round of applause for all of the storytellers in our reality section of the evening. We've heard some on the importance of green spaces and safe spaces and the consequences from lack thereof. We've heard about deep connections to land, both near and far. We've heard how the polluted world is affecting that connection. We've heard about passion for change and the drastic effect that lack of change has on mental and physical health. But most of all, we've heard that young people are already deeply impacted by the climate crisis and will continue to be for the rest of their lives. It's scary to share such personal accounts of life with high-ranking government officials, so props to the EELs for that. But we're now going to open up for a little bit of time here for folks to share some reflections. So if you have any reflections on the stories shared by EELs, go ahead and throw those in the chat. If you have a couple quick things to say, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. But share with us some of your reflections or questions you have about the Our Realities crew this evening. I'll pause for thinking. I'll do another prompt for sharing any reflections that anybody has. You can go ahead and pipe up if you'd like.
I'll share.
Go right ahead. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Alice Roberts-Davis, and I just want to apologize for being late. As you can see, I'm in my mobile office, so I was just a little bit tardy, but in a way, I'm glad that I was, because I had an opportunity to hear the eels, it sounds like we're calling them, before I'm giving some comment. And I just want to say how impactful it is to hear from these young people about how they're thinking about the environment. It is incredibly important that we listen to them. I'm touched by the young woman who says that she cries and that she spends a lot of time thinking about her future and the future of her friends and family. And I think that that's something that we should all be taking to heart. And I would echo what you said, that it is incredibly courageous for them to stand in front of a group of government officials and talk about how they're thinking about the environment and what it means for them. And so I would just say hats off to each and every one of you. And thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I appreciate the here to listen. That feels good to hear. I saw Director Katie Pratt mention in the chat about how front and center pollution was in these stories and how a clean environment is not something the next generation can count on. Very true. Go ahead, Commissioner Bishop.
Hi, I just want to say thanks to all of you for sharing these stories. And, you know, I was really touched by, and I've heard this before, but really hearing it from all of you about who mentioned the idea of having children or not having children and the impact into the future that has. You know, that isn't something that I thought about at your age, right? And I'm really touched by that and nervous for you all too. And I think that those stories about, also about, I think it was Akia who talked about his parents and being outdoors and gardening and wanting that access to fresh food and how they can produce it, but fearing being outdoors and the pollution is just, to me, it's really heartbreaking. So I just want to say thank you both and thank you everyone for sharing those thoughts. It's devastating.
Thank you, Chair Bishop, for sharing that. I like that you brought up the point about children and us having children, because that was one of the initial reasons we kind of went towards the futures and realities part, or the way that we're doing this meeting, is because we talked about how a lot of us are like, I don't know if I should have kids. That was one of the main points that brought us to the way we framed this evening. So I'm glad it impacted you. It impacted us too. So we're going to jump on to the next section of our evening now. But if you do have any other thoughts, feel free to share them in the chat. Folks can read them as we continue on with the evening. But once again, thanking the eels for sharing their stories. We're going to jump to the Our Futures section of the evening. And my fellow eel, Ethan, is going to introduce this concept of our futures and give some framing as part of the evening. So Ethan, I will find you and pin you, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Sid. All right, hello. Thank you so much, Sid. My name's Ethan Culver. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a rising senior at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I'm a Minnesota transplant. I was raised in the suburbs of Chicago, but I've grown to love Minneapolis and Minnesota as my home. So I'm really, really happy to be here with everybody and doing this work. So tonight, we as young leaders spend much of our focus in environmental work looking forward. I know personally, when I think of the food advocacy work that I do and the environmental studies that I work on, I think of my nieces and nephews and the things that I can be doing today to make even their teenage years or young adulthood a little bit easier, and moving on with further generations. And so do the rest of my eels the rest of us eels thinking about the future and looking forward. So Since we are all forward-looking young leaders, we've titled this section of our meeting Our Futures. We wanted to emphasize that although we also want to emphasize that although we hope for and urge for collective action, we must acknowledge that there will be several concurrent futures for different folks based on socioeconomic status, where they find themselves in the world, and how climate change affects their lives in their region. So during this section, we would like you all to ponder the following question when you're thinking about what we're talking to you all. What is an essential element of your ideal future? If you head over to the Slido link, which you can either use a QR scanner on the screen here or head to slido.com and put in EELS May 19. We want you to share your thoughts. What's an essential element in one word or fewer, or one word or a small phrase of justice, equity, things like that. This is looking very good. Clean energy. Community, that is a big one for me as well. Fairness, environmental justice. Thriving ecosystems, walkable communities. That's really important. Living in the Twin Cities metro, it's nice to have our comprehensive public transportation system, but we want to keep that expanding outside of urban centers, of course. Cleaner planet, carbon neutrality, accessibility, very, very important. And that's something that this pandemic has really showed us is something we really, really need to work on as a community. Winter and snow, of course. We are Minnesotans after all, so we do love our winters. Reliable, clean water. That's a really important thing for me too. Speaking with Commissioner Bishop in the recent past about water pollution in the metro area, it's definitely something that we need to work on. Sustainability, reduce consumption, leadership, social strength, pipelines. Peace is a very big one that I think we all need to think about very often. Well, this is all looking really amazing, and I find a lot of resonance in a lot of the things that folks are saying. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about your future. Now we would like to pivot our attention to a video that was put together by one of my fellow EELS, Quincy, talking about the futures of 5 of our cohort members. So we'll go ahead and move over to that section of our evening.
Hi there, my name is Kendra, and in my first semester at college, I took a geography class called Causes of Global Climate Change, and this is a class that kind of threw me for a loop and set me on the path that I am now. This is because day after day in that classroom, my stomach knotted up as my peers and I were presented with diagrams and graphs, and this includes the infamous scenarios from the IPCC, showing projections for the Earth's temperature in the upcoming decades. It didn't take long for panicked thoughts to set in. This is my future, and these are our options. I consistently left that class feeling stressed, fearful, angry, and perplexed because the world that I walked back into seemed oblivious to this massive and well-studied issue. You see, my college has 5 core values: community, excellence, justice, service, and faith. And while I shared these values, I saw a disconnect between words and actions when it came to climate justice. I saw a lack of integrity and responsibility. So I threw myself headfirst into action because it was some sort of catharsis for the stomach ache that started in that classroom. In a few months, I co-led a climate justice march on campus. and my heart swelled about 3 sizes as I watched hundreds of students and staff unite around common goals on my tiny campus. Today, I still have that feeling in my gut that I had 3 years ago. I'm still terrified. But I can't stay with that feeling for long before I'm drawn to action based on my values. So when I think of the future that I'm fighting for, I think of the lessons that Robin Wall Kimmerer highlighted in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. Here, she shares stories of reciprocity, gratitude, collaboration, resilience, and rebirth. These are the ethics that I want to lean into. I'm really hungry for paradigms that reject extractivism, hubris, exclusion, selfishness, and domination. I hate seeing the same patterns happen over and over again. I imagine a future where Indigenous wisdom is consistently respected. Communities are places of mutual care, and we spend more time outside, commuting on bikes, and cooking with local foods. I envision a future where my heart swells on a regular basis because I can see my community acting with integrity, walking the walk, taking responsibility, being proactive, and understanding that their footprints are part of larger webs, relationships, and ecosystems.
Hi, I'm Laura Ringeisen, and I want to tell you a bit about my climate story. So I grew up in a rural area in southeast Minnesota. I graduated from college with a degree in environmental science, and I currently work with the National Park Service doing invasive plant management. A problem I feel youth in my home area face is a lack of access to climate change education and information. We also lack comfort in discussing climate change within our community. I personally feel uncomfortable discussing the topic with most people as I've witnessed others being ridiculed for their views on climate change. I think most people choose not to discuss it because of the controversy surrounding the issue. The climate threat we are facing is not something we are taught about in school. I didn't become aware of the reality of our situation until I went to college. But not everybody goes to college, and not everyone majors in the natural sciences where they'd be taught about such things. In my vision of the future, I'd like to see environmental education integrated into our elementary and high school curriculums. I think this step would provide a needed opportunity to talk about climate change and show the people that we as a state value public awareness of this enormous issue. Because it affects everyone, it's important everyone is aware and ready to advance climate change action within our state.
Hello, I'm Sam Rosemark, and I recently graduated from the University of Minnesota Morris with degrees in political science and economics. In January 2020, I visited Saarbrück, Germany, Morris's sister city in a rural town, as part of the Renewables Revolution class with the Climate Smart Municipalities program. It was one thing to hear how Saarbrück produces 400% of the energy they need from renewables, which sounds impressive, but I assure you it is much more impressive to see it in person. I knew renewable energy was the future, but going there and seeing it for myself, something clicked, and it made so much sense to see their whole systems approach to health, wellness, and economic prosperity for all. The many solar panels, wind turbines, and biomass gasifiers energizing the community was like taking a step into the future and made me wonder why Minnesota is lagging behind. One memory that stands out was my last night in Germany. I reconnected with a friend who was a Germany exchange intern in Morris. I remember our conversation vividly like it was yesterday because it has stuck with me. While at a bar talking about the current state of things, this was just before the pandemic hit, we talked about if it was too late, if we failed to act in time to prevent devastating impacts to our and the next generation's future. He was certain that it was, as I saw the deep despair in his eyes. Given the new inspiration of Saarbrück, I still had hope and still do, but we must act fast. The clean energy transition provides Minnesota, especially rural communities, immense opportunity to become more resilient and net exporters of clean energy, just as Saarbrück. Morris recognizes this. The City Council endorsed goals to produce our own energy, reduce energy consumption, and end landfilling. I have learned that goals and solutions like these have a lot to do with the quality of the relationships you build and the conversations that are built over time with those relationships. As the Morris Model intern with my campus's Office of Sustainability, I was personally given the opportunity to create a better future for our young people. I recently successfully authored an MPCA grant on behalf of the local school district to get 2 electric school buses. These buses will replace old and dirty diesel buses, providing cleaner air to children in our communities. We all have a role to play in this beneficial electrification transition, but we must act with increased urgency as we are listening and building relationships with young people to create a better future. Thank you.
In the Hmong culture, gardens are associated with life, abundance, nourishment, and growth. Wherever the Hmong were, gardens and the act of gardening offered support in times of hardship. My parents raised my siblings and I alone in the U.S. with no immediate family members around. And though they took great care of us and were grateful to be here, like many Hmong immigrants, they suffered from untreated mental illness. They were lonely and often yearned for the gardens of Laos. When they grieved, they tend the garden and harvest Hmong medicinal herbs and vegetables. It was at the garden where I was taught about Hmong ecological systems of knowledge and Hmong history. For them, the garden was the closest they had to a pre-war Hmong life. It was their place of solace, and they loved it like it was their own little country. When we could no longer afford to sustain the garden, it deteriorated. It seemed as though the garden was aware its caretakers were no longer present. My parents loved the garden, and it was apparent that the garden also loved them. After witnessing this, I knew I'd be a lifelong fighter for a just climate future. I envision a future where financial stability doesn't come at the expense of sacrificing one's relationship with the earth. I envision a future where Earth's ecosystem and natural jewels of life, such as water and trees, aren't taken for granted, but rather appreciated, protected, and restored. I envision a future where participating in climate decision-making processes aren't a luxury, but a right. Echoing the wise words of a role model of mine, sometimes there needs to be a crack in order for the light to shine through. This is when change can happen. This is a crucial moment in time where we must choose to see and embrace the light. And although the future of the climate remains bleak and uncertain, I have hope that one day soon there will be enough cracks in society for the light to shine through and inspire political change on scales much broader than we are witnessing today.
Hi, my name is Kaya Schlungen and I am an eel. I grew up on the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Indigenous peoples that include the Anishinaabe, which I know as Two Harbors, Minnesota. Two Harbors has a population of 3,700 with Lake Superior in its backyard. I've grown up by the lake collecting agates, climbing nearby cliffs, swimming, fishing, and kayaking. I'm not the only one who loves the North Shore. Maybe you also call this place home, or maybe you're one of the thousands of tourists that stream into my small hometown every summer.
Give our crew with the intense internet a moment here to re-pull up the video. We can do some more stretching. How's that? Have we done shoulders up, back, down? Because I haven't for a while there. Okay, good work. Wriggle the fingers. Do some breathing. Get the video back. Have no fear. I have no fear. I have wiggly fingers. A body that moves. And I move it. Laura's doing some good, this is a good one, Laura. Laura was doing some good stretches there. I like that one. Nice one. No, there's no problem with stretching. A stretch break is a good break. I also invite everyone a drink break. This is important too, especially if you have to talk a lot during this meeting. Hydrate. We know clean water is important.
All right, that video was apparently too much for our tech, and thanks Sam, or not Sam, Sid, for jumping in. Quincy, who put the videos together, did share these individual videos. I'm gonna try to share my screen here and share just that one video.
Hi, my name is Kaya.
Are you seeing my screen?
Seeing and hearing. Sounds good, Faith.
Excellent. Okay.
Schlungen, and I am an eel. I grew up on the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of indigenous peoples that include the Anishinaabe, which I know as Two Harbors, Minnesota. Two Harbors has a population of 3,700 with Lake Superior in its backyard. I've grown up by the lake collecting agates, climbing nearby cliffs, swimming, fishing, and kayaking. I'm not the only one who loves the North Shore. Maybe you also call this place home. Or maybe you're one of the thousands of tourists that stream into my small hometown every summer. My home is a paradox, though. Our economy depends on tourism and the mining of iron ore. We struggle for both a strong economy and the protection of our outdoor spaces. This leads me to an uncertain future for my home. To create a more sustainable and more just community, we need to first envision what we want our home to look like in 10, 20, or even 50 years. I'm not the only one who lives here and has ideas and hope. So I asked some other youth on the North Shore to share what they want our home to look like in the future.
My name is Ryan. I'm 4 years old. I want to see more trees on the North Shore.
Hi, my name's Bob and I'm from Two Harbors, Minnesota. I'm 21 and I think that lakefront should be available to all communities, LGBTQ+, BIPOC, and everyone to have access to take in the beauty of the beautiful North Shore.
My name is James. I'm 6 years old. I want to see more hawks by the North Shore.
Hi, my name is Karina Hebel. I'm 21 years old, and something I would like to see in the North Shore is an emphasis on conservation work, but particularly with youth, as they're going to be the ones that are kind of carrying on this conservation work into the future.
I want to see pool, and I want to see more fish.
As for me, I want to see appropriate acknowledgement of these lands that were taken from indigenous peoples. I also want a bigger effort to challenge the spaces that white people have taken over and excluded people of color, the LGBTQ+ community, and other groups who have been historically marginalized by a privileged few. A climate emergency plan needs to be adopted to protect this incredible space from disasters like the 2012 flood that took years to rebuild, and to initiate guidelines for sustainable tourism. Before this land was my home, it was home for many other people. I want my generation and future generations to get the chance to swim in the Big Lake, catch a walleye, climb up Silver Creek Cliff, hike to the Little Falls in Gooseberry, and eat a slice of pie at Betty's. For that to happen, we need action.
A round of virtual applause as we turn it over to Kendra, who's going to do some reflection with all of you about these videos.
Perfect. Thank you, Sid. And thank you to everyone, all of the eels who were so courageous in sharing all of your visions for our possible futures. Thank you also to Quincy for putting all of those videos together. Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra, and I'm a rising senior studying geography and environmental studies down at Gustavus. I am delighted to be here with all of you today. I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the videos that you just saw. Please take a minute to find a pen and paper, open a Google document, or start a notes page in your phone, whatever works best for you. I think it's important to take just a couple moments of quiet time to reflect on the stories that we just shared with you. There is a bunch of things that you could think about, but you might consider the following prompts. You might think about concepts or phrases from these videos that stood out to you. You might think about the values that you want integrated into our futures. You might have questions for some of the ELs. And you might even consider the ways that you might make these futures a reality. Like, what stepping stones do you want to take along the way? So we'll take just a few minutes for that reflection. When you're ready, I invite you to hop back onto Slido wherever you have that, whether it's a additional device or on a different tab. We have a prompt there for you, which is, in a few words, what are your reflections based on these videos? I'm seeing that people are resonating with the concept of values. I'm seeing that urgency is something that we are collectively thinking about. Heard and saw a lot about land acknowledgement for Indigenous peoples and how recreational justice is so important. The kind of visual of a tightening stomach versus a growing heart. That youth have thoughts and opinions on their futures, but they need space and time to be heard. A really fierce focus on equity, spaces and places for action to take place, themes of access, equity, and hope. Just how heavy the climate crisis really is. The importance of stories and how they can change our perspective. They need to ask Minnesotans what they want to know and what they need. Excellent. Thank you for sharing, everyone. We'll take a couple more minutes for more of your reflections to be shared. I know typing takes a little bit of time. The importance for communities to value their natural resources, accessibility to the outdoors, and inclusivity, indigeneity, the importance of community who is working towards a collective future. The need for climate conversations and education in all kinds of spaces, intergenerational collaboration, love that. Noting that there is sometimes a lack of integrity, rejecting things like domination. These are all really great. All right, we have a couple minutes before we move on. If there's anyone who wants to share something aloud that was especially powerful for you, we have a couple minutes to do that as well. So feel free to speak up if that speaks to you.
I'll speak up if no one else is going to right now, but you're on the screen, Kendra, and I was really touched by your video and statement and the calmness in the perspectives that you were bringing just with your voice, yet the urgency that you feel. So, and I just that idea that, I heard you well on the class and how that changed a perspective and the need to act. And you come off so calm, yet I know that urgency is there and burning. So how you take, how you've been able to kind of position that, your values to action, I was really impressed by.
Thank you. I think a lot about yes and I think there is not one way to react to the weight of the climate crisis, and for a lot of people action is kind of that catharsis, and not everyone can take action in the same way. And so I think for me that has been helpful to do, but recognizing that there is a lot of wisdom that already exists, and there are a lot of great minds and a lot of great energy out there that already exists, and how can we harness those things and collaborate to build better futures. So I definitely
how
agree.
you based it in your values and those of your school, and how you could take those together to take action.
100%. Thank you.
This is Katie. I was really struck, in my job and a lot of the work that I do with other folks on this call, we think about the future a lot. We're planning and measuring and, doing charts and reports and graphs and thinking about the future, but that space to kind of get quiet and think about how that's going to feel and what that's like. We don't do that often enough. And so it was really moving for me to just hear these stories and hear, remember, behind the charts, that's that lived experience that, we all share in different ways, but we all share it.
Definitely. I think it can get overwhelming, or sometimes we kind of get caught up in zooming in on, what is our next step and that kind of thing. But it's also important to take time to zoom out and think about, what is it going to feel like, and have those emotions and thoughts and values motivate our actions and decisions. So thank you for that reflection. I'm going to pass the mic to Laura, and we will continue on with our meeting, but thank you everyone for your reflections and for contributing to the Slido.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks to all our EOs for working so hard for those wonderful videos. There's a reason we want to take the time to share all of our individual stories with you. Each of our EEL members has an important account of their relationship with climate change and how it affects their current and future lives. We want to bring to light these climate-related challenges that today's youth face and will continue to face. Please keep our stories and features in mind as we transition to our wrap-up and discussion portion of the meeting. I'll pass it back to Sid.
Thank you, Laura. I'm moving everybody around here so I can see everyone. Bam. Okay. So thank you to the EELs for sharing your stories. We can't say that enough times, right? We could say it again and again. It's important. And specifically about your futures that you see happening and the futures that you want. We heard young people talk about their futures as they see them happening right now, which is scary, quickly approaching, feels unchangeable. But we also heard a bit about how they want to see their futures, which is very connected to other people. It's clean, it's inclusive and accessible. It's based in family and land, right? And so we tell you these desired futures in the hopes that you feel a responsibility and a desire to make them a reality, right? We're not just telling you so you know, we tell you also so that we can make it happen, and how special and magical that would be. We're going to transition into the final part of our evening, which is our wrap up and discussion section. We're going to do some brainstorming of takeaways, so keep your Slido out. And we're going to also think about some ideas for future collaboration. So with that, I'm going to once again pass it over to my pal Tegan.
Awesome. Thank you, Sid. And thank you to everybody for sharing. I was getting a little emotional for those moments, had to grab the tissues, but really good. It's really encouraging seeing all these responses too. It's really I think this meeting is just going really well. It's really great. So hello again, Tegan here. Thank you to everybody. If everyone could make their way back to the Slido, we're just going to take some feedback on what your takeaways are from today's event as we move into the wrap-up portion of this meeting. The next few minutes are going to be silent time, so please respond with any takeaways that you have. And don't forget, you can always thumbs up other ideas that have been posted as well. Okay, so we are going to take just one more minute to get those takeaways up on the Slido there. I'm seeing a lot of really good takeaways, a lot of good interaction. That's really great. I think our points are really getting across. Thank you to everybody for responding. It's amazing to see such an interactive crowd. But now moving on with the rest of the meeting, I will pass it on to Gabrielle to share the EL member takeaways. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Gabrielle. I am currently earning my master's degree in public health at the University of Minnesota in environmental health studies with an emphasis on infectious diseases. During this upcoming summer, I will be working at a dental office doing a lot of the insurance work, and I also have an internship at the Minnesota Department of Health in the Foodborne Illness Division. I live in Lake Elmo, Minnesota, and my favorite part about living here is in the beginning of spring when trees and plants are starting to bloom. It is definitely a mood booster after a very long, dark Minnesota winter just to see all the green and colors. I hope you have enjoyed the speakers you have heard from, and I'm going to go over a couple takeaways with you from our speakers this far that we want you to know. From our reality group, climate change and its systematic issues are intertwined in other aspects of our lives. It is in the forefront of our minds as we exist and as we plan for the future. For the future group, our individual futures are a collage of stories. We all, especially adults and those in power, need to plan and take action today in order to live in our desired futures. So overall, we want you to leave this meeting and not feeling hopeful, but to feel a sense of responsibility. This will increase the change that we want to see and help to start conversations on climate change. We also suggest trying to meaningfully engage with youth voices more and increasing awareness on this subject, as we believe this will increase communication engagement with the youth who want to get involved in climate change. So now I'm going to hand it back to Tegan and we will share some ideas on Slido.
All right, back to Slido we go. Thank you, Gabrielle. So our next few questions are, how do you have influence to continue supporting youth collaboration? And how do you see youth engagement continuing to happen? So please take another quiet few minutes to comment on this one as well. Remember, you can always thumb up comments. It looks like people were really using that last time. On comments that you really like, to highlight those. We'll just give it a few minutes. Actually, I think this is a really great one from Sid. I didn't know what EELS was, and it had been going on for a few years, and I was very new to the whole thing up until this coming year. Student interns. Awesome, Troy. I think to share your stories as widely as possible is really great. I think even going as far as like deciding what channels that would look like as well would be really great. Okay, I think we've come up with some good answers on the spot. Thank you for those. Next we have Nayana, and she's going to share how we think your influence could be impactful through youth mentorship, as well as youth involvement at the state level. To Nayana.
Awesome. Thanks, Tegan. And thanks to all the EELS for putting together this amazing meeting. It was really exciting to see this all play out again. So my name is Nayana. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm currently finishing up my senior year in high school, both at the University of Minnesota and at my high school in West St. Paul. I spend most of my time outside of school doing mutual aid work in the Twin Cities, as well as some climate justice organizing. So today, we'd like you to reflect on who you feel that your youth mentor is, if you feel like you currently have one. So if you don't have one, get one. I think this meeting kind of made it clear why everyone needs one. Having a youth mentor in literally any capacity is important because youth have passion and perspectives that are essential for all people to engage with. Whether it's specific to climate change or just in general, literally just asking youth what the realities of their daily life are and what they hope for in their futures can be a huge learning experience, especially if you are in a different generation than us. Young people have been brought up in a very different world where we're leading social movements, raising awareness about climate change, growing up with technology all around us, and we have ideas and aspirations that are probably very different from the ones that you had at our age. If you don't already have one, we strongly encourage you to find a young person that you can have mutually beneficial and authentic conversations with. So with this idea of a personal youth mentor in mind, we as both EELS and young people in Minnesota feel that the EQB and SubCabinet have room to grow when it comes to youth involvement at the state level. Conversations about the climate crisis should include the people most impacted by it, young people and systemically marginalized people, and we'd love to see the state make efforts to include more of these people in your work. A good way to meaningfully engage with youth is to just invite them to the table, as you've done today through the EEL program. Some possibilities of how increased engagement could happen include adding youth representation to climate working groups throughout agencies, advertising the open EQB Congressional District 6 board position to youth, and creating a way for young people to have consistent representation at EQB meetings. So these are just a few examples of things that we came up with, and we're also aware that you guys probably have some great ideas as well, and we'd really love to discuss those with you. On to Sid.
Thank you, Nyana. Bam, I'm trying to find everybody. There we go. So we actually like to invite you to do some of this brainstorming, some ways that both maybe you personally could be more impactful and engage with youth more, but also specifically through your work through the EQB and the climate subcabinet. We want to know how you think we can make this more accessible to young people. So we have a few minutes here. We're once again going to open it up for some vocal discussion. If you have any, you can throw some thoughts into the Slido question. That's still open. Keep thumbs up in everybody's ideas. You can also throw ideas in the chat. But anyway, you would like to share some brainstorming for making youth engagement intentional and making youth engagement happen, the EQB and the climate subcabinet. We would love to hear from you. And if you don't have a thought yet, shoulders up, back down, get the blood in your brain. It'll bring you a thought. I know it will.
I said, this is Katie. I can get the conversation rolling. You know, one of the things that, you know, I've been thinking about as you pose these questions is, you know, having those kind of youth connectors or those champions. Sometimes it's a youth serving organization. Sometimes it's a college or university. Could be a technical school. I think there are a variety of ways, but maybe, you know, as a state, we need to identify more of those connector organizations or established folks in different parts of the state that we can reach out to. You know, we are aware at the state, you know, in government, we're not always on the same channels, the same communication channels that I think all of you are. And so we need to find other ways to kind of get our messages connecting with different audiences.
Thank you, Katie. I heard that comment reflected in Chair Bishop's comment in the chat about just getting the information out and what are those channels. So that's a question that you could ask to a bunch of young people who are at a meeting right now, you know, and we could give you ideas. And so young people, if you have any ideas as to the best ways to get information out to youth, throw it in Slido and then we can thumbs up them. And then now people have some ideas. Does anybody else have any other thoughts about ways to get the EQB and the climate subcabinet more intentionally engaged with youth?
So one of the comments that struck me was that state government's confusing, and that would be something that we could probably be helpful with. You have a lot of leaders across a lot of agencies that do a lot of different things here. And I think probably, you know, something that might be good to collaborate on is to be able to say, you know, you can say, we want to do this, and we can say, here are the 3 people that you should talk to, or the 2, you know, and help be navigators a little bit in that way. And I think that might be a place to help you be more effective in your work, and for us to better hear, so that you don't go on a chase to find the right the right agency.
I see that, is it Director Jashki? Do you have something? Yeah. It's John. Hello, John. I see that you have something to say. Go ahead.
Well, you know, to Commissioner Arnold's comments about trying to have state government help you, right? I mean, that's what we're here to do, I guess, or you help us, you know, and both of those things are possible. One thought I had is, you know, we are going, you know, through a continuation of a process, you know, that SubCabinet started. And one of the components of that is going to be outreaching to, you know, interest groups, stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, and having some of you participate in some of those conversations that we're going to be organizing, I think might be a useful way to both have you help us and hopefully have us help you by making those connections in an efficient fashion. So just one idea. And of course, we'll have others that'll follow up with that. It does make sense. If it doesn't make sense, you can just forget who you just called on.
That makes complete sense. I think what you're saying is we have a network of people here who are willing and wanting to connect and assist each other in our goals, right? There's young people who want things to happen, and you're saying, yes, young people, we want to help you. And the state government wants to reach out and know what the young people want to happen. And we're saying, we'll let you know. So what I'm hearing is there's room for future communication and future questions. And I'm going to scroll to the top and look at my list of what everybody's official titles are. And I'm just going to make a guess. I'm going to say Commissioner Strowman. You go ahead.
Okay. Or I'll follow my colleague and say Sarah works too. But you did get it right. You even got the last name pronounced right. So thank you. One of the things that I've been thinking about since I came into this role, and we've been having some conversation at the agency, is as a public agency, when is it our responsibility to represent the public interest, right, and speak on behalf of the public? And when is our role better to facilitate or to empower members of the public to speak for themselves? And I think maybe this is one. I mean, many people have said how powerful the stories were here that we heard tonight, and I couldn't agree more. And it strikes me that this is one way, right? We have empowered we've created a space for these stories. And this question is just generally, I mean, if there are other places or forums where we can use our role sort of not to speak for youth, but to create the space for youth to speak. I'd really be interested in that, because I think that's something as state agencies, we need to think a little bit more strategically about our role.
Absolutely. I love that concept. I love the concept of what if MnDOT and the Department of Health all had youth engagement meetings like this one, right? And youth could come and specifically speak to what they're doing. That would be really cool. I would personally show up to the MnDOT one because I drive a bus, and that would be fun. So that makes a lot of sense. We have a hand up. Public Member Forsberg, you can go ahead.
Yes, it's been terrific messages tonight of concern and kind of worrisome in that it's been pretty pessimistic. I would like to speak a bit for optimism. When I was a kid, I remember going to a friend's house and listening to a radio this huge thing must have weighed 50 pounds, and telephones that weighed 5-10 pounds, and huge cars that got 15 miles to gallon. And as the years have gone by, your cell phone, ounces, has music. You can use it as a telephone, and you can use it as a computer. Think of the resources that has saved. There are very positive things happening also. We were generating electricity by coal. We're rapidly moving away from that to wind, solar, nuclear power is there. There's just all kinds of positive things happening, and I think we should recognize that also and encourage moving in those directions. One of my favorite sayings is the Stone Age didn't end because they ran out of stones. They found a better technology, and we're finding better technologies every day, moving toward a more efficient, better world. I think we have to recognize that to support the world's population, our country's population, at a reasonable standard of living and a reasonable standard of health, and provide access to cultural and educational things, takes a lot of resources. So we have to find better ways to do that. And we are finding better ways to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I hear a lot of changes happening, but that doesn't mean that all change is happening downhill.
That's right.
Which is good to think about. I do have my teeny tiny little phone right here, and I can just talk to my mom right now.
Yes.
It is her birthday. Happy birthday, my mom. So there's exciting things happening too with change, right?
Yes.
I also see that my good pal, Sam Rosemark, up here on the prairie, you're not on the prairie right now, though. You went home. Sad. Also has something to say. So Sam Rosemark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sid. I definitely appreciate Member Forsberg's comment. I think we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We can acknowledge progress, but also push for more urgent action too at the same time. But my comment in terms of how do we connect with young people, I I think, inherently government is closed off to people. Working as a state senator, or not working as an intern for a state senator, it's hard to access these channels, and part of that is on purpose because we don't want everyone contacting and making it really hard to communicate. So that is an inherent barrier. So I think we need to meet young people where they're at, go to them. We can't rely on holding a meeting and hoping young people show up to it. We're hoping that young people find this wonderful EEL pilot program. I think we need to go to youth and folks and talk to them and engage with them, whether that's at an elementary school, a middle school, high school, a college, or a university. I'm a former student body president at the University of Minnesota Morris, and I know all the student associations at all of our colleges and universities, whether in the university system of Minnesota or beyond, would be happy to talk with all of you and listen and provide feedback. I think, it's good to present kind of where we're at, some info using like the report card that the EQB puts out, but also providing a lot of time to have discussion. So I think that's really good method to go to those leaders. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam, for sharing. I like your point of youth have thoughts, youth have ideas. It's the government's job and the EQB's job to reach out to them, right? That's kind of hints at some of other themes we've talked about tonight, which are inclusivity and accessibility, right? Like people have ideas. Not all young people know about the EELS program, but all young people have thoughts. And most young people have thoughts about climate. So absolutely, great point. Karine, I see you're raising your hand. You go ahead, share your thoughts.
I just wanted to take a moment. I know a lot of people don't know how to find youth. And one way that I've found that is kind of, I wouldn't say that doesn't cost any money, because a lot of the ways that you want to find youth cost money. It costs money to pay to advertise. It takes so much time to establish social media channels that have enough of a youth following that aren't already the exact people you're reaching. So you end up reaching the same people over and over again, which is really annoying. But an easy way to find youth and to find people is Google, LinkedIn. You can look for people who are in positions and reach out to them. And the worst thing anyone can do is say, no, I can't help you. And another thing that's super easily available is finding people like teachers at local high schools. Science teachers, like my science teacher at my high school, John Sandler, wonderful guy, would be super interested in anything climate related. And so if you Google like high schools, find the science teachers, find their contact info, shoot them an email and be like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I was wondering if you had any students who you thought might be interested, or you could talk to your class about this cool opportunity that we have. That's a super easy way to get information to a set of youth that you might not otherwise be reaching. So just my thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karine. I think the concept of how do I reach out to this audience is brought up at every meeting about everything ever. It can be the local co-op. It can be there's an event happening downtown. Like everybody's like, how do I reach the audiences? And I think we can ask that question a bunch, but I think if we're not actually taking action on what people say we should do, then like, what's the point of asking the question, right? So we have all these young people here. If you're genuinely wanting to reach out to youth, you could just reach out to literally one or two of the youth here. And I bet they know another youth or maybe a couple other youth, right? So there's ways we can do this, and there's ways that aren't deeply complex. It doesn't have to be a big puzzle to solve. Ask a young person a question. There we go, right? It goes back to our youth mentor concept of, do you know young people who you can simply talk to, as opposed to networking with young people? Because you'll meet more young people if you have a young mentor, right? That's how it works. We have maybe 1 or 2 more minutes for other thoughts, maybe some final closing thoughts as we move on. Faith, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead. What do you have to share?
Thanks, Sid. So what Karine just said about engaging with teachers made me think about the fact that we actually do have a project that is live right now on an app called Flipgrid. And we are asking teachers across the state to do this activity with their students. And I'm going to try to figure out how to share this so that the YouTube people can see it. not totally sure how to do that.
Yeah, I had
frankly.
thought about that as we were talking too, that.
But if you go to, go to Facebook, the Minnesota Environmental Quality Board, or Twitter, and our handle is at MNEQB. You will see our post about Flipgrid. There's a few weeks left in the school year here, and you can click on that and do that activity with your students. And the really cool thing is that students can record videos about their vision for the future and their thoughts on climate change, and a state staff member will watch those videos and record a response to your classroom. So we will be listening to what your students have to say and taking note of their perspectives.
Super cool. Exactly what we want to hear, right? Engaging with young people, asking them questions. Other thoughts before we move on here? Okay, well, I'm going to take that as a no. There's no other thoughts. The Slido is still open, so if you come up with a thought, we'll leave it open for a little bit. Toss your thoughts in there. If you haven't read some of the new responses in the Slido recently, I encourage you to do so. Go give some folks some thumbs up for what you're agreeing with there. But really what I'm hearing is that people want to engage with youth, and by people, I mean the EQB and the Climate SubCabinet. Maybe not all people, but youth want to engage with the EQB and the Climate SubCabinet, and we want to make that happen. So instead of just leaving this meeting tonight and saying, wow, we did it, we engaged with some youth, I really encourage you to let that sit in your brain and let you keep thinking about that as the year goes on, because there's still youth and we still want to engage. We were really hoping that this would kind of spark a desire to, instead of just having a once a year EEL event, have more youth engagement year round, right? You can hear these stories year round from young people. We thought that would be super cool. So those are my thoughts on youth engagement. But if you are like me and you want to continue chatting and listening, engaging with folks about all the ideas brought up tonight, then I invite you, if your schedules and if your brains allow it, to a post-EEL event, Bring Your Own Coffee Half Hour. It's got quite the name, but it's only half hour. I don't have any coffee. That'd probably be bad for me at this time of night, but we're gonna keep the Zoom meeting open and just allow for some less structured conversation and some Q&A. So if you specifically had questions for EELs, that'd be a great time to ask them, but feel free to stay on the call. But if your night must continue without us, let me just say on behalf of all of the EELs, thank you for hearing us tonight, for listening to us, for letting us share your stories with you and be vulnerable about our realities. It's a really big deal that young people are invited to this meeting, and it's also a really big deal that you're engaged in listening to what young people have to say about such big issues such as climate. So thank you, thank you, thank you to all of the members of both boards and also to all of the EELs. So let's do a virtual round of applause as we turn it over to Chair Bishop to close out the evening.
Nice, incredible work in putting this together. Thank you so much, Sid, and to all of the EELs that participated and led this event. I know it was in conjunction too with the University of Minnesota Institute on the Environment, who I've worked with too on that Germany Smart Municipalities piece that Sam was talking about. But thank you to everybody. Thank you to the EQB staff. So I really appreciate hearing your realities and visions for the future. I mean, I think I expressed how touched I was by that. And these stories are so vital. And I think we've heard that tonight too. And one thing that, I think you're reminding us of is that we can all do something. And it's time for all Minnesotans to get involved on climate change issues that matter to each of us. And we need to be intentional about it. Just having a public meeting doesn't mean youth are going to come and engage. I think we have to be intentional about hearing from all Minnesotans and all audiences. So how we can do that in a more meaningful way is something that I took away from this as well and want to incorporate into the work going forward. So just, I feel invigorated by your energy, all of your ideas that you raised tonight. I think there was some really practical next steps that we can look at and take from this, and that's important as well. So thank you. I want to thank you all for coming and participating tonight. Thanks to my fellow EQB members and the climate change subcabinet members. And I hope you'll stay afterwards for a continued conversation and Q&A with the EELs. So thanks so much. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Chair Bishop. We're going to open up the coffee half hour. And as I wrote in the Zoom chat, we don't really need coffee because we have Sid, and her energy is just sort of like coming at us right now. So I wanted to let everyone know that I did open up a Q&A in Slido so that even those who are joining us on the live stream on YouTube can type in a question, and the EELs who are here can respond to you. So we're just going to open up sort of like we're filing out of the meeting and people are kind of gathering around and chatting. So this is more informal. If people have questions, who are on the Zoom, go ahead and unmute and speak up. And otherwise, I'll just keep my eye on this Slido.
I personally would take this time to walk over to the table with the cookies and the fruits, the assorted fruits. And usually if the assorted fruits hadn't all been eaten and I could take some home, I would do that too. So if anybody wants to come over here and chat with me about fruits we can take home.
I actually had to go turn on my light because, I was sitting here in my office when it was daylight when we started. It started getting darker, so I had to go turn on my light to be able to see you all, or you could see me a little bit better anyway. It was a great meeting, you guys.
Seriously, very well done. EELs, well executed. And I think a lot of good reactions from people on Slido and good conversation. I wish the Zoom chat is just full of wonderful comments. So, I think we're going to definitely be harvesting from the Zoom chat, harvesting from Slido, and using that information as we move forward to reflect on how this EELs cohort went and kind of think about what's going to happen in the future. What are ways we could implement some of these ideas that people have raised tonight?
Mm-hmm. I'll also say, I'm really happy that we had so many people that could make time for this tonight, because we're in kind of a crazy part of these targets now for the budget. And I'd like to think that the legislature is doing more right now, but we need to come up with some targets by the end of, our bills by the end of the next week and our budgets for the next 2 years. And so a lot of these commissioners were working through that right now with their legislative chairs and others. So I'm really glad that so many people could attend.
I'm going to echo that on behalf of young people too, in terms of, I think the University of Morris, at least their finals week was last week. I don't have homework right now, so that's why I could do this and not explode. But props to all of the people who have been doing homework. Like, that's exhausting.
Right. Or high school people that are getting ready to graduate. I know I have 2 high school daughters and a senior who graduates next week. So it's a lot,
Absolutely.
So thank you.
I was thinking I could pose the question again of the youth mentor, because we spent some time brainstorming specifically on engagement with young people, but I was wondering if anybody has spent some time thinking about who their youth mentor is and what they learned from said youth mentor. I'll start and tell you about mine. One of my youth mentors, his name is Brady. He's 10. Yesterday, we were doing homework together to make sure he can end the school year strong. That's one of his goals. And he was telling me about how, he really doesn't hope that it rains, because his baseball game last night would have gotten rained out, but he also does hope it rains, because the farmers need it. So Brady's thinking about the climate and also thinking about baseball, right? And he's just talking about it. And that's another example of youth chatting about climate. But Brady is one of my mentors, and I learn a lot about patience and also grace from him and how he interacts with the world. He's a good kid. Does anybody else have any youth mentors that they want to talk about or share?
You know, I used to have a lot of youth mentors when I was teaching that I got a lot of ideas from. But in speaking of mentors and how they might help, I wondered what kind of mechanism or is there some way in which these stories could be heard by a greater audience? What we heard tonight deserves to be heard at many levels, really. I was thinking even my own city council, bringing that in. And certainly the one that really comes to mind, though, is the legislature. Is there or maybe there is, I don't know, but has there been this sort of thing where the legislature can listen to these kinds of stories? Because that's where the real many of these terribly important decisions are being made. They need to hear from our youth and what our youth are thinking.
Yeah, I wrote something similar in the chat about how powerful the stories are, because again, you end up with a lot of the testimony that gets limited or might have access issues for students to do that. I mean, sometimes some of the technology has helped a little bit more on involvement now that the legislature has been able to transition to that, but I don't know on that.
I don't know if they're willing. I don't know if they're willing to listen to youth. I would hope that they would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just going to say this last year. It has been so gratifying to hear from some of the youth and the youth movement. The strike that took place, for instance, the young Swedish woman who has caused such a stir over the last 2 years. Those are things that I think are terribly, terribly important.
I think a comment to this is that not every youth has to be extraordinarily sailing across the sea to have these impactful stories, right? I would consider all of us eels just like regular old young people. And regular old young people are the ones who have the cool stories, right? So I think that's where it speaks to the mentorship and the engaging with young people, is that you hear more of these stories if you're intentionally engaging with young people. And yeah, the point on the legislature, that's like somebody has to do the work to do that, because that's a bigger concept. But you hear these stories simply by engaging. That's humanity. That's relationship.
Sid, I wanted to build on what you said about kind of just being regular people. I think that is so powerful. I think we build up in our mind that in order to make change, you have to be extraordinary, or you have to be, doing something. But sometimes just the everyday, that was really powerful tonight, is just the everyday stories of how you're living your lives. And not sailing across the ocean to raise awareness for something, although I have to say many of you are doing pretty critical stuff that I definitely was not doing when I was your age. But still, just connecting with people on that level of here's what our life is like, I think is amazing. And to Jerry's point about I do really think that young people talking to folks in their elected leaders, their city council people, the people that are representing them, is really important, and having that connection. I know, when sometimes we'll hear from elected officials that sat down with young people in their community, and that sticks with them, right? That really sticks with them. So, we can brainstorm and think about ways that we resource, and help young people, be empowered and have access to those conversations.
Katie, is any of that part of the Green Step program by any chance? Is there any youth connection built in to that with cities?
That's a great question. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it is a good question. I mean, we do have the Green Core, which is actually, you know, a lot of students, mostly students that then participate and integrate into projects, and it's a stipend too that youth, usually it's college age students that would participate in something like this as well, or recent grads, which is an interesting program. And then they help cities become more sustainable, or nonprofits or other organizations as well, which is a pretty neat way of integrating that youth perspective right into the day-to-day work. Nick, I see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I was just going to speak to this question of who are youth mentors. Like, my most obvious ones are my kids, who, because I live in the same house with them, right? And they're 14 and 16. And a couple of the things that I've learned from them are, well, one that's really striking is to me is that, like, I really intellectualize, and they're feeling very, very immediately, you know, a lot of anxiety and a lot of the things that Kendra talked about and others talked about. So that's really striking to me. And the other thing that I've learned is that they, I'm very inclined to, like, sort of split issues, to be very specialized and individualistic, and think like, well, I only like, work on climate issues. And for my kids, you know, they really don't separate like climate and racial justice and gender justice. And there's not really boundaries between those things, which is always a really important reminder for me. So, I mean, in a way, that's kind of the easy thing. My own kids, I'd like to think about how I can expand that network, which I guess is another thing I've learned from them. Like, I think, you know, how would I do that? And they're just connected to all kinds of people, and they have like technology ways and social media ways of like immediately reaching out and doing things in community, and not doing things as like individuals operating alone. So that's all super valuable to me.
I love this whole comment, the whole thing. Virtual applause for you. That's great. I really specifically like the point of your kids are your mentors, but also, wow, aren't they're connected to so many other youth who could also be mentors, right? And now how that's powerful. Being a cool parent so that your kids' friends are like, that's a cool person, that's powerful, right? That's a theme in my life, is that my parents have kind of been parents to other friends in our friend group, and people know that my parents can listen and respect and hear them, right? Like, that's a powerful part of my family, is that we respect what the people have to say. So I think that's powerful, if reaching out to young people through specifically your children is deeply impactful. I love the whole comment, everything.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've gotten pulled into, and I love it, but, you know, my community here through my kids, to go to the high school and talk to the Tree Huggers Club, which was awesome. But also to talk to the Women's Rights Club. And again, these are all intersectional in a lot of ways too, you know, the climate and women's rights and reproductive rights. It's all so for me, my daughters, who are so engaged in all of this as a 10th grader and 12th grader, have pulled me into more discussions with youth. So, and not just me talking to them about my role, but getting ideas and figuring out how we can engage together.
I'll jump on the kids teaching train, although mine are much younger than either Commissioner Bishop's or Nick's. So I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And one of the things that really impressed me about some of your stories were how they were, you know, gardening with your parents or doing some of those small things. And I think it, you know, I tend to, we're regulators at Commerce. And so we're like the most macro of maybe any of the, you know, we're like the farthest removed from people, probably of any of the agencies, which means we have a real obligation to them, think about how what we do impacts people. But I think, you know, one of the things that's been out here, you get to see them. So I'm talking about, we planted a bee lawn last year. And so we got to learn about bees, all by getting stung by bees, but then also talking about how important they are in our ecological system. And so even just small lessons like that are, I think, really, it's good to remember, because then you can build on that and say, okay, now everyone can have that, we can all talk about something like that, and then go on to larger issues.
Absolutely. I love the children show up. How perfect is fantastic. That's exactly how it happens and how it should. Kendra, you have a thought. Go ahead.
I do have a thought. Thank you, Sid. I guess in terms of thinking about the frameworks that we use to think about these really large, complex issues that we sometimes silo into different departments, right? That's how we decide to organize our world, as these siloed disciplines and siloed departments. And just kind of reflecting on the things that I've found helpful. I'm a geography major, and so that has helped me think really interconnectedly about webs and things. But I think applying a social lens as often as possible and thinking about the question, where are the people? I was taking an energy geography class this fall, and we're thinking about all these really technical things, energy landscapes, and we had to step back every single day and say, okay, where are the people? How are they interacting with this, department, or how are they interacting with this infrastructure? So that has been helpful for me. I think thinking about these things in terms of webs or ecologies, where one thing impacts so many other things, and kind of those relationships has been helpful. And then I think Indigenous ways of thinking have also just kind of been a framework shift for me as someone who's just learning about different ways to see the world and interpret the world. So I think that has been some helpful things that I've found.
I like your concept of relationships with people, but also relationships of concepts and ideas. It's all like this. The youth know that it's all like this. I want to pose the question of youth mentors also to the eels, because I know that the not eels here want to hear more from eels. So eels, if you have any youth mentors, I'd love to hear about it. But Faith also has a thought.
I just wanted to jump in here because we have a friend over on Slido who is joining from YouTube, who is asking a question that is very much in line with the conversation that's been going on. Eric says, our agencies are in many ways not set up to deal with the intersectional nature of climate change. Any ideas about how we can look at holistic approaches? And I love that already. I think we're hearing some ideas about ways to think about that, but I wondered if anybody had additional thoughts.
I will say, right, we saw that coming right into this, and I saw that coming into this administration, that there wasn't a centralized place to pull the agencies together. So that was why, so I came from Best Buy and a big company, and you kind of just had a centralized sustainability office that could pull all the different pieces of 100,000 employees together, but so we didn't have that as a central location in state government. And so that was what the climate order was about, to try to bring these together. But now, and it's just been really, it's still in its infancy, but the work groups and then the advisory council to it, I think are the starting of how to bring the different voices together. And we just need to now figure out how to do more of that. But yeah, Eric's right. And I think the other piece is state agencies, but then you have the legislature, which funds the initiative. So the governor can put together a climate proposal, but you've got to get it through the legislature as well. So for state agencies, it's been trying to look at what actions they can take, both independently as well as then through the legislature. And independent actions by agencies, which I've found the legislators don't always want to see that happen, even if it's in the statutes for the agencies to do that.
this is Katie, and people should feel free to sign up. I know it's been a long day for many folks, so know that you can sign up. But I'm personally avoiding getting sucked into bedtime, so I'll stay and chat a little bit. But one thing that was interesting that I didn't hear a lot of in the conversation tonight was just talk about the pandemic. And, that's got to have really shaped your worldview tremendously, living through this in the way that you are and thinking about jobs and thinking about what your lives will look like. It's certainly in state government thrown us for a loop in terms of our systems and it has been a setback, frankly, to some of the work because we've had to spend so much time just reorienting to the pandemic. But I'm curious, and also the intersectionality of what we've experienced through the pandemic and also climate change. So I'd be curious to hear from the EELs any thoughts on that.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, Katie, because I graduated from school in 2019 and I told myself, I'm going to take a year and just work and hang out and not do anything. And that was a really big deal for me because I was like major extrovert around doing everything. I was a part of the intertangled web very intensely. So taking a year to step back and just hang out with me was a very big social, personal ordeal. And then that year got extended and intensified in a way that I was not expecting. And so it's really changed how I've been able to interact with my communities and how I've been able, and even how I've been forced to be disconnected, because getting out of school is already one of those really big, lonely, isolating events. Being a part of this system that's structured how you live your life for, however many years, and then leaving it and being like, that's a whole bit, right? Everybody's like, how do you make friends when you're in your 20s? Nobody knows. I don't know. And so it's really changed how I see myself within the web, and how I can, because I feel like I'm no longer in a web, right? So it's harder to jump back in. And so I think about that a lot for people my age and who are being spit out of school and kind of losing traction on where they are in the web and where they want to be in the web, and how that's really hard, and how I think that's why the intentionality of reaching out is so deeply important, especially now because of the pandemic. Because if Troy wouldn't have sent me an email and said, hey, Sid, you should do EELs again this year, I wouldn't have thought about it. I wouldn't have done it. And this has been like my main social outlet for the past 2 months. Like I'm moving next week. And so like literally right in front of me is like all of my furniture and my stuff packed up. And I've been like an extrovert hanging out alone in my house for a year, right? So it's been really an intense way to figure out how to get back into things that I feel are important. So I think that speaks really heavily to the intentionality of having the capacity to reach out. Because if people don't do that, granted, it is on them and it's not on them, right? There's always this duality of it. But I've been thinking about that a lot, and especially how it's changed my spring specifically. Like I'm seeing this event wouldn't have happened if people wouldn't have intentionally reached out because of how they know me. So yeah. Ethan, go ahead. Ethan, you're muted. No.
Oh,
Your
okay.
eyes got big.
There we go. Thank
Yeah,
you, Sid. I totally agree. Socializing has been really hard. One thing for me that has been really underscored through the pandemic is the value of community and supporting people outside of your immediate, or the value of supporting people outside of your immediate bubble. I'm a sociologist in training, so I think of Michel Foucault when I think of community, and specifically what he wrote about American individualism and how the American experiment only works when you have institutions of people supporting one another outside of their own small families and economic interests. And I think the pandemic, the calls for mutual aid, the housing crisis in the Twin Cities and around has really just showed us that, like, if we aren't here for one another in our communities, our society truly and literally starts to crumble. So for me, it's been eye-opening and also a real point of drive to really get engaged with my community.
Super true, very true. Green, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I'm a class of 2020 graduate from high school. So like my last ever moments of high school were listening to the governor saying that schools would not be closing. And then he changed his mind on Sunday. So they're just all these people that I'll probably never see again, which is so weird. And it was just a strange way to end high school. But I love reading like business articles and looking at how people who are older than me try to analyze Generation Z as a generation. Like, what are the defining traits of Generation Z? And personally, I think that one of the defining traits of our generation is that we're no longer surprised by anything. Because most of us were young when 9/11 happened, have grown up with multiple terrorist attacks throughout our lives, school shootings, the climate change crisis, and the global pandemic that like destroyed my life for a good year. One of the benefits of the pandemic has been things like I'm able to be an eel, which I would not normally because I'm currently living in Vermont. But overall, I think that this like cultural outlook of, wow, nothing is surprising anymore has given us some strength as a generation, because when nothing surprises you anymore, you're like, well, obviously things need to change. Things need to be different. If the world is in such a state where like, when I hear news of a shooting, I'm like, okay, was it near someplace that I know where people I know impacted? And if not, I'm like, okay, and then I go on with my day. And so the fact that I'm able to have that apathetic response to something so serious shows that as a generation, we've been so impacted by so many things to the point where we're just like done with everything and ready to create change, which is a good thing, I think.
Those are great points.
Absolutely. I just want to jump in here. We are going to stop at 8:30. I know Sam has his hand up here. So Sam, if you could make your comments brief, that would be helpful so that we could close out by 8:30.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that the pandemic has reinforced my view about how everything is really connected. So in terms of pandemic, we're seeing folks with respiratory illnesses from air pollution being really affected by the pandemic, and suffering and dying at higher rates, which is really unfortunate. We're seeing that we need local food supplies to ensure food security for folks, but there's also some realizations around valuing the outdoors more and getting outside more. Air pollution has been lowered due to less travel, and we're seeing that we can have walkable, livable communities without cars. Stillwater, they closed down some streets and you could walk in the streets and eat and that sort of thing. Same with other communities, which I think is really great to see. I took up a cross-country skiing recently, so that was pretty neat. But there's less noise pollution, and so I think we're kind of seeing how things are connected, and some benefits around not as traveling as much and having more livable communities. So it's really brought to light a lot of the issues that we've had.
Super true. Super true, Sam. I can do a closing thought here. Oh, go ahead, Faith.
Can I just, I just wanted to say that everything that you said, Sam, I mean, I think a lot of assumptions that we held pre-pandemic have been, a lot of holes have been poked in those, whether it's working from home or closing streets or whatever it is. And I just wanted to highlight, I saw a message come through in the Zoom chat that I know that our YouTubers can't see, but Kendra says, the pandemic has shown me how fast we can pivot as a society when we put our minds toward a unified goal. And I think that really sums up to me what my takeaway from the pandemic, that, if we need to, we can all mobilize and make a lot of changes and really rapidly change our lifestyle. We can, put into place more outdoor living, more of this mutual aid, helping our community members, and putting into practice our vision for our future right now. And I think it's a really exciting takeaway from the pandemic. And I appreciate your comment, Kendra. So I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that. So Sid, if you want to close us out, that would be great.
I can do it. I've been chatting for so long. My brain's going do. Thank you everybody for staying a little bit later. There's a lot of eels here still. Thank you, eels. You're so great. You're such wonderful, amazing people. who are doing such good work. And even when you're not actively doing work, wow, are you such amazing, great people? Like, that doesn't change it, right? So props to you all for that. I just wanted to highlight that we heard a lot about intentionality and inclusivity, and intentionality with thinking about accessibility and the intertangled web, right? So it's not just a leave this meeting feeling like we've done something, but it's not a leave this meeting and bam, good job, hats off to us. It's a leave this meeting and keep thinking, right? So I encourage you all to do that, because I will, for sure, while I'm packing tomorrow. And I also just want to say, once again, I think it's impactful to have a youth mentor. So if you don't know a young person who you could just go up to and have a relationship with and say, hello, young person, tell me what you want me to know, I think that's a problem. And I think you should have someone like that, right? You should be able to engage with young people in that way. Eels too. Eels, find someone younger than you and ask them what they want you to know. But I just wanted to say thanks, and thanks for humoring me and letting me chat a lot out loud. It's been very good for my extrovert energy, being trapped inside a house for a year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Deep thanks to the eels. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Eels, I'll see you next week.